We're going to go over chapter 7 today. These are the organizational factors and the ethical role of culture and relationships in corporations. So I'm going to give you a small introduction to some of the ideas before we discuss the roles of power and understanding of where corporate culture comes from in the organization. We're also going to be talking about how this impacts the employees and the benefit to developing a strong corporate culture between the employees and employers. If we have enough time, I'll go ahead and talk about the dynamics between centralized and decentralized structures. This is a table 7-2 in your textbook there. If you, I just kind of go over some ways to look at it. It kind of brings up some good topics for you to think about as you're going through the rest of this book too. But it really just reinforces the cycle that we already understand and how we develop processes within the company. So we'll get there when we get there. But first, a few words about culture. So this is normally we reference culture based on our perspectives of people. For this section, I kind of want to broaden the scope. You're going to think of this more as a shared set of expectations, behaviors, and norms in individuals and society. We're going to look at the fact that culture is formed over a long time and how that changes how the organization can cause an impact on its cultural. And then once culture is established, it's relatively stable. So when you start making these changes to your organization, they're going to have lasting effects. And any changes that, I guess if you look at the conditions of the current environment, how you could make changes to better impact your situation or any corporate situation going on. So looking at like Sarbanes and Oxley and how that changed everything, it takes a lot of action, a lot of effort to change things. So we look at culture as a relatively stable thing. So the cultural role in the company, these are going to be, it's associated with the success and failures of the company. They're going to be formal gestures like ceremonies. I mean, we're most familiar with like graduations. You have like award ceremonies, inductions, along those lines. These are formal gestures. You can also codify your actions. So when you're protecting people's rights or employment opportunities, that's a formal gesture of culture. And then you have informal gestures, which would be statements made by leadership, the implications that are made by the actions of employees, of the employer themselves, impact of the type of business on it. Those are all types of implications. I mean, the handshake or a hug methodology, if anybody has heard about that brash mindset behind management, it's like you're either complimenting or you're scolding your employees, trying to motivate them into action. So it's like these are all informal gestures, and they'll have different roles in establishing the culture. So I'm going to take a look here at Google. This is probably one of my favorite, and I'm sure that you guys have talked about this one a lot if you don't already know a ton about it. This is just a 1-minute clip here. And as we look at it, I want you to think about how the company looks, what kind of labels you associate with the company based on what it's doing for its society, the programs that are offered, and legends. The chapter speaks about this. Legends are just people that are held up within the company. So if you're like, a major data developer, Timna Gebru, we'll talk about her a little bit later. But she's an expert in AI in Google, or was in Google for a while, leader of the Black and AI movement. Thank you for sharing some of this information. I really enjoy learning about some of these rights here. It's pretty cool. But we'll get into that later. So let's watch this real quick. And as you're watching the video, please think about the bullet points I've labeled on the side here. If you can't hear audio, please say something.
We can't hear anything.
So when you share screen, there's a little tick box in the bottom left, right? So you're gonna have to stop sharing your screen and then choose share again. And then when you do that, check the little tick box that plays the audio. And if you can't find it, I can share it from my screen too.
So many windows to go through.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's see, everyone can see the screen, right?
Yeah, the screen's up.
This is a brief overview of Googleplex campus and headquarter in Mountain View. In California, Google is constantly being named as one of the best companies to work for. It feeds its employees 3 gourmet meals a day for free. It offers them an array of perks from yoga classes, in- and outdoor activities, to massages. The Googleplex, meaning a complex of buildings, is the corporate headquarters complex of Google and its parent company Alphabet Incorporated. But Google's campus expands far beyond its headquarters in Mountain View, but you will need to get familiar with Google headquarters and hidden gems before checking out Google's new buildings which spread out throughout Silicon Valley. At the Google campus, guests can also visit Google Android lawn statues and sculpture garden, which features a new colorful candy Android sculpture each time Android operating system is released. Next to the garden is Google Company Store, where visitors can shop for gifts, wearables, merchandise, and accessories.
So those were audio glitches that were part of the video there. I just found something short and quick for everybody to see. So we have, it's an expansive complex. It's interactive with its employees. They're very casual kind of feel, open environment. I mean, at least I get the idea that it's open. Of course, many people talking about this, they explain about how it's got a very open climate to it. Everybody can speak and do as they need. We have the lunch programs are programs that would be offered to the employees, and then they do like the sculpture park that shows little like demonstrations of what's going to come out next or what has come out next in their Android line. So these are just various ways that Google demonstrates culture. These are their formal and slightly, and most of these are formal, but and some informal gestures. So last week we talked about the luggage here, and now I kind of want to say, instead of what kinds of luggage are we bringing to the workplace, I want to look at how the corporation organizes this and allows us to maybe even optimize ourselves in the workplace. So personal ethics and morals, these are what help build our culture in the workplace. This is our culture. And we have to understand that, again, from last week, that even though we all have a similar perspective on certain things, there's still completely different perspectives. And we need to be able to recognize those and how do we accept them and then move forward together. So let's go ahead and look at where the workplace culture lives. This is going to be a little bit more on the employee-employer side, and I'll kind of sum it up for you. But do we have any questions before I move on to the next bit here? Looking good, looking good. All righty. So we know that corporate culture is the same as organizational culture. This is something that we've already talked about in several other classes, including this one. And when we make the assumptions about this, we're basically making this association. We're looking at the similar behavioral patterns, healthy relationships, toxicity. They determine the effectiveness of the company and the effect of like corporate culture on the effect on stakeholders. This is very similar in both definitions, and you can go ahead and just transfer it over. We look at the same, like documenting roles, developing a mission statement, having a strategy formally put out, And then developing goals that you can organize and then execute. And then you want to be able to monitor and learn from all of the goals that you attempt to execute. So it's like this similar cycle seen over and over again. And later we'll also learn how to apply Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the situation as well. So corporate culture is the same as organizational culture. So there's different expectations that an employee has. Two of them are going to be income and benefits. And this has other implications as you think about how the money comes into the firm, but literally, are you getting enough to cover your health? Are you getting enough to make sure you have a home? Are you able to, what is your income like? What is the money you're making, and what are the benefits the employer are offering? This is literally the expectation every employee should have of their employer. The next ones, these are a little bit more complex, but this is kind of the where the magic happens. To steal someone else's words there, we got challenges. We're defined by our accomplishments. So it's you find satisfaction based on overcoming a challenge and then understanding that it was meaningful that you overcame this challenge. So you find challenge, satisfaction, and self-esteem are all very important expectations for your employer to provide. And it's important for the employer to understand that they need to provide these things to their employees. And then finally, are meaningful relationships. I talked about toxicity a little bit, just mentioned it. You really don't want to spend a third of your life working with people that make you feel terrible day in and day out. And when your employer can provide you with relationships that are meaningful, things that really you can extract something valuable from, these are long-lasting relationships even sometimes, or short. You just have a manager that you really liked at that one time. It's like, that's cool, you never talk to him again, but that was all you needed. So these are meaningful relationships. These are things that the employee expects from the employer, and the employer should expect to provide for the employee. Next, I want to look at the core values and how this reflects on the core values. Basically, what we're saying is that you have corporate culture with the addition of this motivation, a vision, and a goal in mind. Formerly it used to be profits. Now our goal is to provide a benefit to our stakeholders. This is pretty much the most common theory in society today, I guess, or in business today. We want to have a goal to provide to our stakeholders in a long-lasting way. So this is our corporate culture plus a vision plus a goal. And by having core values that reflect the individual values, the beliefs and customs of our individuals, and the cultures that they're operating within. Ceremonies, this is supposed to be the formal recognition of this culture. When you congratulate your employees, that's one thing. When you hold a whole party for something else, that's another. But these are all ways to recognize, and they fall into the culture of the company. And then our codes and policies are the handwritten or the written documents of the company as well. These are all corporate culture. And when you have a good vision and goal behind them, they'll drive your employees to better places as well. So we want to look at how this affects our job performance, really is the summation of this section. So we're looking at the ability of the employee. This is obviously the possession of a skill and being able to do something. So you have also motivation driving performance. And this is the reason that you have to do anything. That's like the factor that causes action. And when you put these two together, you end up with different types of performances. So if you want your employees to provide you with a good operating experience or efficient processes, or even coming to work happy, you need to meet the relatedness needs and then their growth needs. And I brought back Maslow's hierarchy needs just to kind of really point out the different things that are in our needs. You guys should be talking about this a lot, but if you're not familiar, self-actualization, this is that part where you understand that you're here and you want to do things with yourself. The esteem is the value that you carry for yourself. Love and belonging is the value you feel that you have towards others. Your safety needs is that security that you have that tells you that it's okay for tomorrow to happen. And then physiological needs, this is just your air, water, shelter needs, your biological needs, the obvious stuff of just being alive. So when your growth needs are met, you're basically hitting all of these and you're allowed to accelerate forward in your life. When your relatedness needs are being met, you're finding satisfactory social relationships and interpersonal relationships that are really building you in a direction. So even that relays back to the growth needs. So this is how our corporate culture is going to affect performance. And that's kind of how I highlight that in the chapter. Are there any questions before I talk about the next segment here? Rocking, we're cruising right along. So where corporate culture lives, really, it's one thing to look at the individual, but another thing to look at how the individuals are being coordinated and they're being grouped together. So we look at the groups and the group norms. This is going to be teams, work groups, committees, unions. They have a very formal, established frame of time that they're going to be working for. If you took organizational management already, or even business communication, they talk about this. This is an established date that they are starting, and then when this project is complete by date, and that is when the formal group is over. Sometimes they have an indefinite end, but I mean, usually you can still put a date on it. The assigned objective is there's one goal that this group is trying to accomplish, and they're pushing towards that. That can be an expansive goal, of course. So we have different types of committees and groups that work on a variety of different projects, but there is an assigned objective. This is what applies it as formal, and it's appointed. So there's someone who said, hey, we need to form a group, and then they formed a group, and now that group is working. So that is kind of what makes up a formal group. On the other hand, you have informal groups. Ad hoc is just with need, basically. So there's you have a group that's formed, say, hey, I want to go to lunch. You want to come with me? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, 3 of us are all going to lunch. Or, hey, I really like to play music in the park. These guys here are swimming in the beach. Like, I mean, coordinated swimming was never my thing, but I thought it was a goofy picture. Maybe you guys would enjoy seeing it. But I mean, if, say, this group here in the picture got real serious and then wanted to compete, well, then they can evolve into a formal group and compete, and all of a sudden they're practicing, rehearsing, and winning medals together. You know, that's kind of the difference between the informal and the formal. I point this out a little bit because you can develop a core values based around how you handle situations like this. If you've noticed, informal groups have the ability to I guess, bypass certain things in the organization. So it's like when you have people who are meeting with other higher ups and not meeting with others in that group, you have an ability to maybe talk about things that others wouldn't have any control over if decisions were being made or something. Well, a corporation and entity, they become ethical in these situations when that's not a norm for them to do. So maybe they have the power to do so, but instead they take it back to the office. They're like, oh, this was a really good idea we discussed at lunch. Let's make sure everybody gets on this topic. And all of a sudden everybody's generating wonderful ideas and you have a really good working entity. So it's like the way that a company handles the way it's groups and the way that the informal groups are working underneath this grouping of an organization, I guess, this is integral to how the culture is defined in a company. So if we look at these groups, there's also another portion of it, and this is kind of derived from the idea that leadership controls where everything comes from. They set the example for the company. It's top down, and this is because of our various types of leadership influence. We talk about power, and there's 5 different types the book discusses. I really enjoyed talking about these ones. So I'm going to bring up some here. The first book, the obvious one, is reward power. And I guess the second one be just about as obvious. It's this: you're given something for doing something. The leader is able to offer you a reward for or a benefit for an action. This can be in the form of money or status or even a ceremony, as I have loved to bring up so much. And if you look at it as more than what the employer is already offering, you can see how there's actual control being put there. It is one thing for like an employer to say, I will terminate you for not doing your job. And another thing for them to say, if you're not adequately performing, you may lose your position. So this, in the reward side of it, you can get a wage for doing work, or you can get a reward for doing additional work. And that brought me already to my coercive power. This is your punishment for action. Sometimes this also can be inaction. So maybe you're not meeting your goal, so you get punished. If you are overstepping your boundaries, maybe you're punished. If you are, I don't know, I can't even think of any great examples. It's you were punished for doing something that you're either doing or not doing. That's coercive power. The third one here, I got our CEO of Google up here in the front. He's our legitimate power force. As the CEO, he has all the cards and is capable of making decisions that others cannot, and people follow him purely because he's the CEO. That is basically as simple as legitimate power gets. Then you have expert power, and I brought up Ms. Timnit Gebru, excuse me. She's the founder of Black and AI, and I mean, this is she's a defender for the bias in AI and developers that are coming around as mostly as a white-led middle upper class group of people that are designing AI, and there is little culture being spread around within these, and the programming reflects this as well. So she was terminated at Google for expressing these values freely, but her expertise in this field has led her to be in control of all sorts of things, and she's made change in the youth across the world, and I mean in AI across the world, and she's still working out there right now doing all kinds of stuff. So it's like expertise is what influences others. This is the power that you have because people know that you know what you're doing. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have the control over the situation, but because you know, people want to look to you for it. So that's your expert power. And then the last one, this is a very, very simple one, and probably my favorite one, or at least I've had the most rewarding work experiences experiencing this as a referent power. And this is an acceptable mutual influence. The book's definition of it, excuse me, the best way to describe this is I need you, you need me, we know what we're supposed to be doing, how do we work together to make this happen? So it's no one person has all the power. I put a chef and a server up here because that was my experience with it. As I was front of house, chef was back of house. As much as chef may have wanted to throw a pan at me, I saved his butt plenty of times, and like it goes back and forth. So he wouldn't get rid of me because I save his butt, but he does control everything else that goes on in there too. So it's like we have to give and take a little bit in order to succeed, and that's how it is a mutual influence. So I do like referent power. I feel like you have a lot to learn from your employees if you are the one in control, and you can remember that when you are the employer, that you can learn a lot from your employees. So every leader is different. Leadership roles have influence in all kinds of different ways. Is what I really would like you to take away from this slide, and hopefully you'll understand the 5 types of power pretty clearly here. Because the combination of power and group happens in a variety of ways, it can change your perspective on things like this. When is it okay to tattle? as a common family value, you learn don't narc. We all, I mean, maybe not all of us, but very familiar with not narking. Like we just don't tattle. But I mean, Enron had to get found out eventually, right? A lot of people were losing a lot of money, and if we didn't have whistleblowers, then maybe we would have a lot more people losing out on a lot of things. So maybe it is okay to tattle in the corporate situation. Your group, your power, the power influencer of the group, they're all going to tell you how these rules work. Is bullying allowed? Is your leader a bully to you? I mean, I've had managers who've been like that with me. They're just like not they don't treat you right. They expect a lot from you, and then they give you nothing in return for it, and you eventually find yourself in a different organization for it, which is something I'll bring up later. Not everybody has the power to do that. That's as an employer, you shouldn't be expecting your employees to take care of their situation for themselves. You should be looking out for your employees. So is everybody being treated equally? I mean, this has been a problem in the US for years and the world for years, centuries. It's just, we want to solve this problem here in the corporation. Treat everybody equal, bring everybody in, give everybody a place, have their ideas expressed in a way that encourage everybody to keep working. As this is something, and then the whistleblowing thing that I brought up is another one of those that's just like, are you being encouraged to do the right thing, or are you being discouraged to do the right thing? And is there a change that needs to happen in the culture because this is what you're demonstrating as a leader? That's how these really impact it. And so the driving factors here are going to be these two concepts I really want you to keep track of. It's the concern for people and the concern for performance. I drew an XY axis for you so you can kind of get a good idea of what this looks like, and then the 4 concepts from the book. So you see here we have no performance on our at our XY axis here, and then performance rising and the concern for people rising as we move outwards here. So the first one that we deal with, it has a lower concern for people and a lower concern for performance. This is your apathetic culture. The best example I could think of for this one was a salesman. And a lot of the sales positions I feel have the worst conditions for employees, and are probably going to be the best examples for this and the next type as well. But you think about how the only thing that drives you to be there is the fact that you can make a commission, and you will do anything you can to make that commission. And the employer doesn't care what you do to make that commission, because they'll just kick you out if you don't make your sales quota. So it's just like nope, nope, and everybody means nothing to anybody. It's all just dollar values and numbers, and that is the end of that relationship. So low performance, low people. You're probably not going to make as much money as you could in the situation. You're probably going to make a lot of employees very unhappy. Turnover is probably super high. The second one, probably similar situation. This is another one of those where I feel like sales culture really drives this home. They want absolute perfection and top quality management of your or top quality sales, and the organization must be the first thing that needs are met, but you don't matter worth anything. So let's get it done, and there's no serious reward for it. If there is a reward, I mean, you see that in some pretty terrible situations even too. So which is a lot of work, little reward. That's probably the best way to characterize this exacting type of culture. The next one is the caring culture. This is probably this is ideal. If you can't be a profit-making company, this is at least you're caring. And that it is hard to be a caring company too. It usually requires more expense. You need to have knowledge on the foundation and the aptitude to be able to like manage all of those people that you're going to be employing in that way too. So having a high concern for people may take a toll on your performance. You're not necessarily going to be like, let's get the highest sales guys. It's more about going above and beyond for your employees. And we see this in a lot of situations, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not making profit. So it's just, this is the caring, this is the side where your employees come first. When you kind of have the best of both worlds though, is a good performance, good people. You want a good focus on both of these, excuse me. The integrative culture is going to be the top. It's the one where you are saying my employees matter, and then your employees matter so much that they're coming to work and doing their absolute best to make a great product that the world absolutely loves too. So it's like you get the best of the best. I mean, integrative culture has the top concern for people and performance. So moving on, the culture performance, what is the glue that holds ethical values together in a company? We decide how concerned a policy, when I ask how concerned a policy is, what I'm really saying is, do we do this because we want to avoid a lawsuit? Or do we do this because we want to make sure our employees have a meal when they come to work? This is our ethical framework. And basically, when you sum everything up, when how these groups and individuals interact, you're doing this either because you're told to, or you're doing it because you want to. The compliance space, you really set down a lot of rules and regulations. Everything's codified in handbooks and mission statements. They record it with the state. They're following rules, regulations enforced by the federal government. This is a risk management tactic, and employees understand this. Your stakeholders, they understand this feeling. Being a compliance-based organization has a specific type of feel behind the motivation of the company. A values-based one, this is kind of where you want to be. If you're doing this, you're leading by example, you're offering benefits, you're actively pursuing a strong ethical foundation because you really want to. And that is a good culture, and that is pretty much where you should be striving for as an organization anyways. So really understand the difference between the two, focus towards finding the values in your system. Okay, so this pretty much concludes everything in the chapter. Do we have any major questions before I bring up my bonus topic here? Nay, awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Charles, actually, given the extra time that we have, I want to take you back up a little bit. I think that if you go back to slide 16 with Maslow's hierarchy, I think that's really interesting. Why don't you talk a little bit about sort of what happens with employees when they're not getting when they're worried about their physiological needs or their safety needs versus what happens when they can move on to like belonging needs and esteem, that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you're looking at like, I wish I had a better, like an example. Let's say in my life here, a catering company that I worked for until the COVID, it was Kevin Taylor's, wonderful organization. The guys opened 30 some odd restaurants in the last 30 years. Most of them are closed now. Pretty much all but 2 of them are closed now, one of which his son is open now. But Kevin Taylor's at the Opera House, and I worked over at Palettes, the restaurant that was in the art museum before they demoed that whole thing there. Well, they have a very tight-knit family culture. So it's kind of one of those things where you kind of warm up to everybody slowly over time, and then as you get accepted, basically you never leave. So I was there for almost 7 years, and we were all great friends. We'd all been through some terrible stuff together. But this was kind of a place where I don't know if you guys know much about the server culture, but it's basically a bunch of drunks. We all are very angry, and we work a lot of hours in a very, very tireless manner. And that it's very low esteem people coming together to feel very highly esteemed about themselves. So this family, this was formed in a very tight-knit way because we developed esteem with each other. We were able to bring each other up. We gave comfort to the fact that we aren't just terrible drunk people who gave up on life. We do like to perfect things, and we really like to care about our customers' needs. And it's like this was we were able to really have a high esteem culture when we're at work. So it really brought us together that way. This also kind of applies to that self-actualization side of it too. In order to achieve that portion of the need, the management basically had a very off the side influence. They set up the parties, and then the group dynamic of the servers, the front of house staff, and the group dynamic of the back of house staff basically drove how the company worked. So the management would let us handle any problems that we had on the floor between ourselves, basically. And I mean, if anybody tried to bring it to management, usually the response would have been, well, did you go talk to them? Well, did you go take care of it? I mean, I don't need to hear about this stuff right now. You need to go fix that. So it was kind of like, it was on us to make sure that our group was working well together. And that was kind of how the management gave us this kind of self-actualization. We were basically forced to reckon with or reconcile our differences and work towards making a perfect performance for our customer. So there was self-actualization. There's a lot of backfire on this considering other parts of that culture. So I think that we didn't actually have self-actualization in a way that benefited our lives, but the culture that was there, that was being provided, allowed us to have self-actualization as a group. So you could look at the love and belonging, because we were the ones setting the standards as a group. We knew who mom and dad were. We knew who the siblings were, the cousins were. It was very much like, you know who you are, you know who you like, you know why you don't like the people you don't like, and you still all work together anyways. So there's a huge sense of belonging. There is no one being cut out for any sort of reason. So I mean, that is the way that love and belonging is brought out in that type of business culture. Bill, sorry, you look like you're about to ask a question. Oh,
No, not at all. Not at all.
everybody doing okay so far? Stop working. All right, so then the physiological needs. This one I was kind of dealing with a little bit before, like bouncing around between houses and like, you live with girlfriends and stuff. It's like the hard part of your early 20s when you can't decide what it is you're trying to do here. You find it difficult to feed yourself sometimes. You find it difficult to find a roof over your head. And when you're doing random jobs, basically, when you're just working part-time over part-time over part-time. I mean, I worked like 6 jobs at one point all at the same time. It was crazy. I was like on a just non-stop cycle of work basically for about 2 years before I found my job at Kevin Taylor's. And it was like, they gave me a paycheck that covered my rent, my food, all of my bills, and then gave me enough money to start going back to school. So it's like, basically they met all of my needs by offering me enough money to compensate for the time that I was giving them, which I mean, compared to how I was working before at minimum wage and like, pulling 90 to 100 hours a week, like the paycheck was considerable. I mean, it basically quadrupled, and that cut all my time down to, a normal 30 to 40 hour work week, if that. And I was very, very happy. My physiological needs were met because they were paying me a fair price for the product that was being offered, which I didn't know this coming into catering at a very low experience, but they definitely offer an impeccable product. So as I was being paid accordingly, which I got very lucky to get into that as an open position. But that's kind of how my employer is an example for meeting Maslow's hierarchy needs and why I was able to stay with them for so long. Does that clarify better for where we're at with this, or would you like me to talk about anything else?
I'm good. I'm good. I just thought that was highlighting that would be add some additional clarity. So thank you.
Yeah. How's everybody else doing? Good? Rocking. Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite chapters. I think that the defining power in the leadership was a really kind of like perspective changing, if you will, for basically my influence and the reason for why I had to deal with a lot of the stuff that I did. It was nice to be able to sort it out. So to close her down here, I have the table that I pulled out of your book here, and I just kind of wanted to highlight what it is that you should kind of be able to understand up to this point. We already know that influence is going to be from the top down. We know that leadership tells everybody else what to do, and you can see this when the groups, the decentralized structures have control of how the company does it. It's still top down, but it's at sub levels. So the overall corporation is spread around, the overall organization is spread around, and there's different pockets of culture. This is difficult to change amongst the entire organization, and each of these small ones has it's a very fast change. So it's easier to change the culture of a small group of people, but it's harder to change the group of the entire organization in a uniform way in this case. With a centralized one, the reason being difficult is that it is the hierarchical structure of an organization requires a lot of flow through, a lot of example setting and time. So it's like even if the CEO does one thing, it may take months before the cashiers start doing another. That is why change is going to be difficult or simple in the different types of structures that we're looking at in organizations. This also really like being able to react to the things that go on in the organization. This is that recognizing something that needs to go, something needs to change, and then actually having the ability to change it. This varies by the structure as well. So when you're centralized, things tend to be overlooked because you're waiting for the upper management to look at things. So it has to go up the ladder before it comes back down the ladder to make a change. When it's in a decentralized structure, each one of these pods, that's kind of like how my work experience was. They have the ability to enact change right there on the spot. Everybody literally will behave differently based on what one person can say in just a single moment. So it's like when you have that decentralized structure, it is a very, very quick change, and you should be mindful of how that's going to impact the culture and the way decisions are made and the way processes are followed, the way things are implemented. This is across the board, how these two are going to work. And then there's it's called ambiguous influence, but it's like whether you have direct control over someone or whether you are just causing things to happen in their life. So you can not pay someone well and they will either leave or live in terrible conditions because they can't go somewhere else. So there's this ambiguous influence that management has over their employment or their employer or their employees. And that it is different between the centralized and decentralized because of how up close management is in a decentralized structure. And how far away management is in the centralized structure. So the impact of the top down is cascading in a centralized and is kind of like little fires everywhere in a decentralized organization. Does that kind of take care of that understanding there? Is that a clear understanding for your centralized, decentralized structures? Yeah, okay. All right, so then you should be able to take away pretty much everything that you need to from this chapter. These unethical issues, they're not necessarily illegal. You can do all sorts of things that are not good for your employees that not good things would be being done to you that are not illegal. It's totally okay for it to happen, and it shouldn't be okay for it to happen. So being able to look out for those unethical things that aren't illegal is important for corporations to be able to do, for businesses, for organizations. The next thing is that we need to look for ways to empower the employee. How are you making your employees feel like they can make a positive impact on their work environment? How are you giving them control of their life outside of work? Are their needs being met? Is their their hierarchy needs, are they all being met? How do you empower employees? Are employers empowering you as an employee? How do you want to look at that? Is it time to say something? Can you speak up? Do you feel comfortable enough to speak up? All very things that keep that in mind as you move forward in the book. Are you promoting honesty? Are you promoting this discussion? This is that open table, that idea for why a lot of companies are becoming innovatively successful. As they're drawing from their community, they're drawing from their employees. They're looking at the bottom of the bottom of the ladder and saying, hey, you guys should open your mouths a little bit because you actually have important stuff to say. And then they do, and all of a sudden everybody's finding themselves a little bit happier. So you want to promote the honesty, you want to promote the openness. That's a very important thing to look at. Not expecting employees to resolve their own problems. This is the one thing that I think that employers take advantage of, is that employees come in to get a paycheck and that's what makes them happy. We're good. So that's not the focus that we have anymore. We're 2021. I mean, this is like 30 years past that point where it was okay to do that anymore. But you really want your employees to have a voice, to feel good about themselves, to want to be able to return to work. And then the last thing is that there still aren't easy solutions. So as you're going through all of these, you have to be creative, you have to be flexible, you need to figure out all the ways that you can apply something in a different way and open your mouth about it too. So it's not staying under the rug. It's not being allowed to be swept under the rug. So no easy solution, and the impact of corporate and organizational culture is high on everybody's personal lives. So thank you all very much for listening to me today. I will return your screen control back to you. Would you like to ask me any questions?
Yeah, at the end there, or at least while we were talking about empowering employees, it got me thinking back to when we were talking about diversity and inclusion, when Dr. Herman was giving his lecture on diversity and inclusion, and how, diversity, really what stood out to me about that was diversity isn't really enough, and how I connected that to empowering employees is to strive for inclusion. And so you could achieve that inclusion by empowering employees. Do you think that's a good connection I made there?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Oh, sorry, I might be hard to hear.
No, it's okay. I just didn't follow it all the way.
Yeah, that's on me. Well, I was just saying that, we want to empower employees. And then I tied it back into how we want to find more than just having diversity in a workplace, striving for inclusion in the workplace. So not just having people in the room, but ensuring that they have a voice and they feel safe to express that voice.
Absolutely.
Is just kind of how I connected that back into. And so, do you think that's a good connection between we can achieve good inclusion by empowering our employees? Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving someone the power to make decisions and you're letting those decisions be made and have influence in the real world, then they're actualizing their decisions. They're having an interest in what's going on. They're definitely involved. They're being included. So I think that's absolutely the way you should be thinking about it. And I'm glad that that's what you're taking from it. Thank you.